You're listening to the 40 Fit Radio podcast, dedicated to the 40-plus community. Join us as we discuss the truth about fitness and health using science, reason, and the experiences of our host and content experts. Welcome to the 40 Fit Nation. Hey, welcome back to 40 Fit Radio and welcome back to the 40 Fit Nation. I'm here with Coach Trent today.
Good morning.
And this is Coach D, as you already know. And we are live from the 40 Fit Radio studios here in Keller, Texas.
And Coach D is rocking a killer stash over here.
It's good,
yeah,
man.
It's looking good, man.
Yeah, well,
you look like you could. You look like you could have come straight off of a undercover FBI
like a 70s
scene.
show.
Yeah.
Undercover 70s show.
Did you have a shoulder holster with your 357
That's
Magnum?
what I'm talking about. There's a cowboy look here. You know, I want to make a T-shirt, and the T-shirt's going to say, "Cowboy's a verb, not a noun." And so it's really true. This is kind of, you kind of live the cowboy lifestyle, or you cowboy.
Yeah,
It's not a noun. Oh,
right.
Yeah, there are cowboys, but cowboy's more about an attitude. It's a state of mind.
Is it kind of one of those things, like if you have to go around calling yourself a cowboy, you're probably not a cowboy?
Yeah, and I'm probably, obviously, if you're a cowboy, you make your living managing cows. You make your living working with livestock. That's what a true cowboy is. A day worker. And in the world in the Western lifestyle, day workers are guys who are cowboys. They usually have a half-top trailer, like a half-top Hughes trailer or Easley trailer, and they've got a flatbed and they're driving around, and they've got ranchers that call on them and day to day, and they might work 3 days on one ranch and 2 days on another ranch, or 2 or 3 weeks or a year on a ranch. But that's cowboying.
Yeah.
But then you got guys like me that have ranches and that love to cowboy, and that's a verb. But yeah, it's a great lifestyle. So the mustache is in honor of all those ranchers and cowboys out on the Western Plains and all throughout our wonderful states here in the U.S. that are still producing livestock, still producing forages and feeds for all you humankind during the COVID-19 epidemic. Because whether we recognize it or not, food doesn't come from the store. It comes from where you spent last weekend, Trent, and that's out on the ranch.
That's right. Yeah, I was going to say, don't sell yourself short on the cowboy lifestyle, because you're living it out there. I got to visit 5M Ranch with me and my wife went over there, and we actually camped on the back of your property. Yeah, cool. Which is fun. Yeah, it was great. Good weather, and we got to see your operation there and see the Smokies getting big.
Calves are getting big.
Got to see your new bull.
Yeah. You got to have Shizu herd the bull.
So, all right. So we have 2 dogs.
He's a massive dog.
We have he's half Yorkie and half Australian Shepherd.
This is an interesting mix.
He's about 20 pounds. Yeah. He's got a little terrier hair coat. But he got out there. He's hanging around with us when we were moving the bull into the pasture. And he saw the gate open, and he's looking at the bull, and he just gets right up on it. He puffs his chest out.
Yeah, man.
He drove that bull all the way into the pasture.
I thought he was going to grip him on the heels or on the hocks. He was right on top of him. But no, that's And that's really what the mustache is about. I like all things cowboy. I love the Western lifestyle. I think the Western lifestyle is a dying lifestyle that we could learn a lot from, and there's a lot of strong people in the Western lifestyle, both physically and mentally. And so today we're going to talk about lifting heavy. We're going to talk about should older athletes, should older lifters lift heavy? And when we always say older, we're referring to the 40-plus crowd, obviously. But this could apply to the 30-plus crowd, too, because in most professional or most organized sports, both team and individual, over 30 is masters. So you very seldomly see, middle 30-year-old high-end athletes anymore. I think we're seeing it more and more, but it's not common. Yeah, because the body just gets used.
Yeah,
up.
a lot of.
Think about that. A 35-year-old running back in the NFL is old,
ancient. Yeah,
it's old. Basketball, they're towards the end of their career. Football, towards the end of their career, manage the position. We're talking like the NFL, but baseball, they can last forever because that's not a real sport. No, I'm just joking.
I love it. I love it back in the day when they used to, chew tobacco. And, it's
have a shot of whiskey in between up to bats, But we're going to talk about lifting heavy and is it necessary, and why should the older person lift heavy? And let me just preface this by saying the general trend of the older population, the over 40 population, because I have lived this. I think all you guys that are out there in the listening audience that are over 40 have lived this. The general trend is as we get older, we feel the wear and tear on our bodies. We feel the connective tissue issues. We feel the joint issues. We may have some joints that are a little creaky, a little crunchy, a little painful sometimes. We don't move as well as we used to. We're a little less mobile. And so the general tendency and trend is both physically, and I think the physical is driven by the psychological because of many different reasons. Some reasons that are physiological, because there's a pain, there's an inhibitory pain loop there sometimes. So when we do something that hurts, so we have a tendency to avoid it naturally.
Sure, yeah.
And then I also think that it's psychological in the sense that we begin to think and build this new first principle that if I'm older, I can't lift heavy because it's hard on my joints and my joints already hurt or my connective tissue already hurts. And so maybe I should just do toning work or maybe I should just do cardio work. And that kind of, as we age, that gets more and more pervasive as a thought line that we should not go heavy and we should stray away from heavy weights because we might get hurt and we don't got much left to use anyway.
Right.
It's amazing. I talk to guys and ladies in their 40s that they're done.
Yeah, they've already hung it up.
The peak of their physical development is over, and it usually happened in college or high school.
Right.
And then I talk to individuals, and usually it's a much smaller number, but then I talk to individuals that are like, no, man, I'm still setting PRs.
Yeah.
And I think that's based on the maturity of the athlete, where they are in their athletic development cycle. But I'll give you an example. I mean, I set a bench press PR last week. And it only took me 53 years to do it. I'm kind of a slow grower. But I've always wanted to bench press 3 wheels.
Yeah.
To bench press 315. And I've got kind of long arms and I'm a reasonably strong guy in the upper body, but I don't have the nice short stubby arms like Will Morris. My DPT friend, who he has to move the bar like 3 inches.
Right.
I've got to move the bar like 18 inches, down and up. And so, but after shoulder surgeries and after being a little banged up, I thought that's just not in the cards. And I'm actually using a narrow grip position.
And that's big because you're not just doing a standard bench press. You're doing you're doing a more triceps heavy.
Yeah, it's a little bit more triceps centric,
close grip,
a little bit more lat triceps.
That's a harder lift too. So 315 is legit.
Yeah, and I got a heavy single with 315. So that was my annual goal for 2020, and I met it because of the quarantine. That's all I've been doing is lifting. But no,
just benching alone.
But I think there is a balance there too. So what we're going to talk about today is how can we endure to lift heavy? Why should we lift heavy? What should we do before we try to lift heavy? And this is not in order, folks. And then also, what happens when we lift heavy? In other words, we know we're going to tell you the why, but also what is actually happening that is of value to us. So let's first talk about what we always say comes first with every single trainee that walks in the door, and that is, what are we going to do with them first, Trent?
We're going to get them strong.
Yeah.
Got to get them strong.
Well, don't we lift heavy to get strong?
Well, of course. Why? Yeah. But why? Why, right? Well, let's revisit our first principles here.
Yeah.
What is strength? In pure physics terms, strength is just producing force, right? Your ability to produce X amount of force, that's your strength. Right? That's it.
Right.
So if we want to get strong, we need to produce more force, right?
Right.
And if we need to produce more force, we're going to have to lift heavier weights because weight is our proxy for force, right? If you can lift more weight, you can produce more force.
So does that mean I go for 1 RMs? Like just starting the gym, I start doing 1 RMs and 2 RMs and 3 RMs and stuff. I got to do a 1 RM to set my program up, don't I? Because I'm the least experienced I've ever been.
That's
I may have never lifted weights, so put me under a 1 RM, coach.
Come on, coach.
Hey, coach, which wall do I run into next?
Oh, man. We joke, but this happens all the time, right? It happens all the time. No, of course we don't start with a 1RM. We've talked about this in our novice programming episodes. If you go back to any of our programming episodes, you can get a more detailed description of this. But the first thing we have to do is establish a baseline, right? And we've got a lot of things going on when we're dealing with the novice lifter. Number one is they've never done these lifts. Right. And they're kind of complicated, especially the squat and the press. I mean, those are not easy lifts to master, right? So it's not realistic for you to take a brand new lifter who's never done this lift, or maybe they've been doing it wrong for a long time, or it's been a long time. It's unrealistic to throw them under a super heavy bar and expect them to execute it with good technique.
It's dangerous and stupid.
It's also dangerous and stupid. Yeah. So your idea of, I'm going to walk in the gym, max out, and then use that to set my programming, that's it's terrible from a logic standpoint. There's another problem too. When you're a novice, by definition, every time you train, you are setting off a stress recovery adaptation cycle, the SRA cycle that we've talked about many times. And the stress of one workout is enough to, as you go through that recovery cycle after the workout, make you stronger. Mm-hmm. So if you did a 1RM, as a novice, let's just assume that you somehow could perform a true 1RM. You really can't as a novice, but let's just assume you could. Well, you got stronger from the stress of that. So the next time you come in the gym, there's no point in doing a percentage of it because your strength has already moved. Yeah. Right? So we don't measure top 1RM strength as a novice. We start with a moderate amount of weight, which is a set of 5. We've determined that that's a pretty good middle of the road.
And it's not a 5RM either.
No, it's not a 5RM.
It's just a slowing of the bar path 5 rep set.
It is a set that can be done pretty dang heavy. Yeah. But it's enough reps to get some muscular growth, a little bit of muscle endurance as well. Right. And we do it for 3 sets of 5, not 1 set of 5. So that we're building some volume, and we've just kind of determined through experience that that's a good starting point for someone to build strength primarily, but also have enough stress in terms of volume and muscular growth to keep them progressing for a long period of time.
Yeah, people ask me, well, how heavy is that really first starting workout foundation set? What you're actually going to start with. And one of the biggest mistakes that novice lifters make is they either start way too light, which I'd rather have them do that than starting too heavy. Right. But they start too heavy. And I would say it's about a 60% lift. It's about 60%. If you had to measure it on an RPE, rate of perceived exertion, it'd be about a 6 on a 10 scale. Right. If 10 is a crushing heaviest lift you've ever done, heaviest 5 rep set you've ever done. So
that's right.
It's going to be somewhere in there. But the number one thing Trent's talking about here, folks, is that every lifter, every trainee that comes into our gym or into my clinic once we're out of the precautionary timelines of treatment, they are going to do a novice linear progression to start their journey of strength building. We're not going to be doing the kind of heavy, and I'm putting that in air quotes, lifting programming that we're going to be talking about here in just a few seconds with the novice. The novice program is a specific program with a specific architecture, specific structure to build strength, to build foundational strength.
Right.
But let's say once we have built the foundational strength, we've got to move forward.
That's right.
I mean, we've got to move on from there.
Yeah, you can't do 3 sets of 5 forever. Eventually, you hit a plateau and it stops working. Right. And we've talked about doing resets, and there are various tricks you can do to extend that 3 sets of 5 program. But eventually, you reset and it just doesn't work anymore. So you start to change the reps up. And then what generally happens is as you move from a novice to an intermediate lifter, by definition, what's happening is you're having to spread out the stress in the stress recovery adaptation cycle. It doesn't happen anymore in discrete workout blocks.
Why do you have to do that, Coach?
Well, it's because you've gotten strong enough that the stress on day 1 of your week, on your first workout of the week, is you can't recover from that by the next workout.
Oh, so I need more time in between.
You need more time.
Got it.
But it doesn't work so well because you could say like, well, I'll just work out less, right?
Right.
And then I'll keep going heavy, 3 sets of 5. Well, you also need enough work, enough overall stress,
tonnage over the week, volume, time
to drive
attention.
more progress. And so that's always so. There's always two factors that are happening, and every time your program starts working, it's only really for one of two reasons. Number one is you were not able to recover from the previous stress,
right?
And so you're walking into the workout pre-fatigued, and you don't have the gas to do your program weight. All right, that's one reason you fail, and the program ends. The other reason is you don't have enough stress from the previous workouts to have driven the extra strength adaptation to do the programmed weight.
Right.
And the answer, it's always some combination of the two.
Right.
I think as a novice, it depends on the lift. I think for the heavier squat and deadlift, it's a stress problem. There's too much stress. It was too stressful, and you're coming in too fatigued. And that's the reason the program stops. I think for the upper body lifts, most of the time, for most people, it's the other reason. It's that there's not enough incremental stress to drive continued adaptation.
Right. Lots of variables are in play here. Genetics, time under volume, intensity, where you're at in your training history, where you are on that spectrum of maximum genetic development, on that curve of growth over time.
Right.
But ultimately, what we're talking about, guys, is that when you first come in as a trainee, you got to do the novice program. And you got to advance within the novice program. So novice intermediate, novice advanced. When you exit the novice program, heavy is now heavier. But it's not where it's going to be eventually in your genetic development potentially.
Yeah.
Because we haven't used as complicated of programming. We could use a very simple programming approach with you early on. You're going to get stronger, okay? And that might be enough strength for what you want. But let's say you step into the intermediate and advanced programming models. Now, the next question is, how often, generally speaking, because it matters. We always say this, it matters.
Yeah.
How often should an older person over 40 lift heavy, and let's say on a weekly basis within the week? And here's what I find. Here's my number one statement about should an older lifter lift heavy? Yes, and absolutely yes. That is a triple yes there. Okay, that's 300% yes. Now, an older lifter cannot lift heavy with the same frequency level as a less experienced older lifter, like in the novice program. That's lifting heavy 3 times a week.
Right.
Okay. But it's relative to what their training history, their athletic development, where their starting loads are. That's all relative. It matters. Okay. But as now you really have gotten into your true, well, let's just call it strength reserves. You've gotten into your true genetic potential of where you're actually going to end up or go to. Now you're at the top of your development or the middle to the top of your development. And what we're trying to say here is that gains get to be really, really small, and now they require some creativity to get those gains.
Right.
And so I find that older lifters should lift heavy, and in general, and this is a very much so a generality, I like my older lifters to lift heavy in a simple intermediate to advanced programming model at least once a week.
Right.
At least once a week, they're going to lift heavy. Now, that might be in the form of a heavy triple. That might be in the form of heavy doubles, or it might be in the form of a heavy single.
Right.
Okay? That's always going to be balanced with the fact, because we would call that intensity.
Yeah.
That's our intensity variable, because we've got intensity and volume. Okay? Those are the two things that we really manipulate within strength programming. We've got intensity and volume. And we've got other things like exercise type and those types of things. Frequency, how often you lift, is going to influence your volume and could potentially influence your intensity too. But the two things that we puppeteer are intensity and volume.
Right.
And so I like my older lifters to lift heavy once a week. Now, my much more advanced lifters might be lifting toward heavy in kind of a periodization model,
right?
Where we might go from sets of 8 to sets of 6 to sets of 5 or 4 to sets of 3 to sets of 2 to singles, heavy singles, over weeks.
Right. And that's
over weeks. And that's much more advanced programming.
Yeah.
And we might even do undulating periodization where we go up and down in those volume and intensity numbers so that we're building. And the whole idea here, guys, is this. We have to spread out the stress events or the stressors to allow your body to adapt. And if we apply too much stress, you won't grow. You'll overtrain. If we apply too little stress, you won't grow. You'll undertrain.
Yeah.
Okay. If we apply too much stress, your joints hurt. You don't want to train.
Right.
And if we apply too little stress, you don't see gains. You don't want to train.
Yeah.
And so it's a balance. And so what we're trying to do is at some point, we have to take you to the heavy side. And the way I like to do that, the how is I will usually implement 1 day a week of heavy type lifts to be our stressor that's going to help your top tier strength maintain or grow.
Right.
Okay. More important, our goal is growth always.
And the reason there, again, the reason why you have to do a heavy set to continue to grow, when we're saying growing, we're still talking about strength production, right? Force production.
Right.
And the reason why you have to do heavy reps to build that strength is because of the SAID principle we've talked about.
Right.
It needs, whatever you do in your training needs to be specific to the adaptation you want to have, right? So if you're trying to build strength, you have to produce more force. More force is more weight on the bar.
Yeah, if you want to get stronger over time,
there has to be a heavy stressor.
Yeah, right. And here's what generally happens. I mean, so getting stronger and lifting and fitness is all about stress and adaptation, guys.
Right.
It's that simple. It's that simple and it's that complicated. It's all about stress and adaptation. And so as a lifter develops over time, both males and females, they get to where they need more stress to get less development. It takes a lot more stress to get a much more developed lifter or athlete a tweak or a small amount of increase in their abilities.
Right.
What I like to do with my older lifters is I like to use that 1 day a week heavy lifting concept. And what that does is, number one, it's going to help us stimulate more muscle protein synthesis, which as an older lifter, and this is the reason, this is the reason why we do this, guys. The reason why we still have heavy lifting and programming for older athletes, older lifters, is that if we don't put a high enough stressor in there, an older lifter won't adapt. And the adaptation that we're looking for here is strength.
Yeah.
They will not adapt. They'll hit a plateau and they'll stop adapting over time and they won't get stronger. My goal is to get you stronger and to continue to get you stronger. Now, there is, we've talked about this, how strong is strong enough. There is a limit in regards to what a lot of people, where they're going to go to. But we want to continue to drive that as much as we can because it's good for our psyche. It's good for a lot of reasons. I mean, we've talked about the biological reasons and the psychological reasons. But we need that stressor. And the reason why we need that stressor, and, you know, there's a big buzz in the strength world about volume.
Right.
You just do more volume, you know, do supersets and giant sets, do volume. Volume doesn't work in an older lifter. I'm just going to tell you, volume without having a significant heavy stressor day, it just doesn't work.
Yeah, and let's just quickly talk about why. You mentioned one of the big reasons, which is muscle protein synthesis, right? So that's just simply the process that your body goes through in reaction to stress where there's a lot of muscle fiber recruitment. So if you have to recruit a whole bunch of muscle fibers, your body's like, holy crap.
Right.
If I'm going to survive that next time, I better build some more muscle. Right. And you kick off all of the processes that the
physiological adaptation.
That's right. You're releasing growth hormone and testosterone and all that stuff that builds more muscle mass for the next time you have to lift heavy. Right. And as you age, naturally that the robustness of that whole system decreases. Right. It's not as efficient.
Right.
You need more stress into the pot to get the same response, right? And so these guys talking about a lot of volume and doing a whole bunch of volume in their training, well, they're leaving out the fact that muscle protein synthesis response starts decreasing over time.
Right.
And you have to, it's all relative to how heavy you're doing it, right? It's a totally different, so let me draw two different comparisons here. Number one, we've got a guy who, he just come out of the novice program, or girl. He's squatting 225 for 3 sets of 5, okay? And let's say one program's like, bro, you got to do volume to keep growing, right? We want to build that muscle mass in you. You got to do a bunch of volume. So why don't you do 5 sets of 5 or 6 sets of 5? Well, what is he going to do that? What weight is that going to be?
Right.
Remember, he just squatted 225 for 3 sets of 5.
Right.
He can't do 225 for 6 sets of 5.
Right.
Or 5 sets of 5. Right. It's going to be 185 maybe?
Maybe not even that.
Maybe not even that. And all of a sudden now, he's not producing a whole lot of force anymore in his workout.
It's reps for the sake of reps.
Right. Now, let me contrast that.
I call them junk reps.
That's right.
Now we need some reps.
That's right. Now, let me contrast that.
We're not downplaying the need for volume.
That's right. Yeah. So now let's take the guy who squats 500 for a 1 rep max.
Right.
He's a 500-pound squatter. That means he's going to be doing work sets in the low 400s, right?
High 3s, low 4s, yeah.
Right. So now what is his 5x5?
Right.
Like mid 3s, 385, 375, I don't know, right? That is a lot of stress.
Right, exactly.
Okay, doing 375 or whatever for 5 sets of 5.
Right.
That is a huge dose of stress. That's a much different event from a guy doing 185 for 5 sets of 5.
Correct.
And so it's all relative, right? And so that's why we keep the focus on the heaviness, right? The intensity of the lift, because that's most specific to building strength and muscle mass.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this. Okay, we talked about you got to enter and exit the novice program,
right,
and get into intermediate programming, and then as you develop. We do believe that the older lifters should continue to lift heavy. You need to lift heavy. The reason that we're talking about here is that, number one, the older lifter has to have more stress overall, and as a stress peak, the intensity of their stress, okay, needs to be higher than a younger lifter to get a similar adaptation. That's the best way to look at it.
Right.
And guess what? You could also look at it this way. When the masters lifter started lifting as a novice, think about them that they were a younger lifter. They were a younger lifter historically and development-wise.
Right.
And so it took very little stress to get them to grow. And now as they've matured, and there's several different ways to mature. One way is you actually grow older. And one way is you actually put more time under the bar. You put more time in your program.
Yeah.
You put more time in your lifting. So you mature as a lifter, you mature as an athlete, and you mature in your biological age too.
Right.
And so over time, as you grow as an athlete, what ends up happening is the stressors have to be greater. And if we took athlete A, who's 20 years old, and athlete B, who's 50 years old, and they both are at the same height of their program of development, athlete B is going to require, the 50-year-old is going to require more stress in regards to load, heavy things, to develop the same amount of adaptation that athlete A will. Because we don't take, when I lift weights, okay, like I'm 53 years old, when I lift weights, or when one of my female trainees that's around, that's a master's athlete lifts weights, and they go into the gym and they have a heavy set, okay? They're going to build muscle protein cell walls, okay, muscle cell walls at a certain rate per the stress that they've provided and per their nutrition and their recovery and the programming and all these different variables, okay?
Right.
It's harder for them to do that, and they do that at a much slower, lower rate than a younger lifter.
Yes.
That's the simple brass tacks right there. That's what happens.
Yeah.
And so because of that, that's why we also say that as you age, you have to consume as much or more protein than a younger lifter.
That's right.
Because when you eat protein, you are naturally synthesizing less of those protein molecules and less efficient at doing it. Your gut's less efficient at doing it. Your musculoskeletal system's less efficient at processing that. And so are your hormone levels than a younger lifter. So you got to keep your protein levels up if you want to maintain your muscle mass. And the reason why we're talking about the importance of going heavy is that number one, it fights off sarcopenia.
Yeah.
It fights off the loss of muscle mass over time as we age, which is key to your metabolic health, in other words, how your metabolism rates up or down, which is key to your ability to move, which is key to your ability to do and fight off other degenerative diseases and improve your longevity and quality of life. We lift because it works.
Right.
And so we've gone through this as we're talking about this. We're wanting you to recognize that going heavy, and like I said, the way I do that is I like to go heavy about 1 day a week with most of my trainees that are older trainees. And it's based on where they are in their programming.
That's right. Yeah. So we can quickly just talk about there's a few different models that we prefer for an intermediate program. And one of them is the heavy, light, medium program, HLM. So you're training 3 days a week, and it says it in the title. You've got a heavy day, a light day, and a medium day.
Right.
So for squatting, for instance, that would look like on day one, you're doing, this is someone who's just come out of the novice program. They do 3 sets of 5 for a new PR.
Right.
Three sets of 5, okay?
Heavyweight.
That's right. So if they ended their LP for 3 sets of 5 at 225, now they're doing 230 for 3 sets of 5. Then the light day would be maybe 80% of that for 2 or 3 sets of 5.
Right.
And then the medium day, the third day of the week, you'd be doing somewhere in between that, maybe 90% of the heavy day. Right. That's a very simple early intermediate program. From there, you can evolve into something like a Texas method. Right. Where you're doing on your heavy day, you've got one heavy day, intensity day, that's maybe 1 set of 5. And it's going to be even heavier than your 3 sets of 5 was, right? It's going to keep going up. It might be 1 set of 3 eventually. So those are like 2 very common 3-day models. And then you've got a 4-day split, which is also a very common intermediate training models, where generally, lots of ways to do it, but generally you've got 2 upper body days and 2 lower body days, comprising 4 days total. And within each of those upper days, you're going to have a heavy lift, and you're going to have a volume lift. So you'd go heavy squat, 1 set of 5, let's say, on Monday, and then on Thursday, when you squat again, it's going to be your volume day for that squat. And you line up all the lifts like that.
Yeah, and I think we specific program iterations, there are some basic constructs that we follow in these programs, but we also look at the individual lifter and kind of where they are in their life cycle.
That's right. Yeah.
But here's a perfect example. I've got a female lifter right now. Let's take her bench press, for example.
Okay.
In her bench press, she can't do 3 sets of 5 anymore with the heavy loads that she's progressed to. She can't do 5 sets of 3 anymore with some of those heavy loads. So what I do is 1 day a week, she does a top single that's really, really heavy. And in some cases, in this case exactly, it's higher than her 1RM was before.
Yeah, right.
It's a new 1RM almost every single training session.
Yeah.
Okay, but she only does it once a week. Okay, and actually she does it once a week on 1 week, and then the next week is just a volume week, and then the following week she does it again. So the way this works basically is like this. She'll do like 1 set of 1, she'll do a heavy single, and then she'll do 1 set of 2 with something just below percentage load of her heavy single. And then I'll come back and I'll back that up with about 3 to 4 sets of 3. Okay, heavy triples. All right. Now, all of that lifting is relatively heavy.
Right.
Okay, that's considered her heavy day. Okay, but she's got these stressors in there, and we got to be careful because I want her to continue to hit those lifts.
Yeah.
Now, her volume day looks more something like 4 sets of 5.
Yeah,
okay?
sure.
And it's going to be at a much lower load percentage. It's going to be somewhere around 75 to 80% of what she's doing on her heavy single.
Yeah,
okay?
right.
And that's her volume day. Now, the next week, what I'll do is, it matters how she's progressing and how she's adapting. I might make the next week that alternate day lift. She's only going to do it once now. So if it's bench press, she did it twice once a week, and the next week she may only do it once for me, and I might make that her volume bench press day.
Right.
And then the next week I make it heavy and volume again.
Yep.
And so that's a great example. So she's not really doing a ton of volume. the volume has actually decreased some.
Right.
But what we're really doing is we're making sure that there's enough stressor in there to keep her body adapting with muscle protein synthesis,
right,
to keep her building muscle mass. And if nothing else, as she's aging, we do recognize that there is this genetic curve, and we don't believe in maintenance, but we are trying to maintenance that muscle mass. We are trying to service that muscle mass. Now, I will say this too. I find that lifters that are older, in many cases, once they hit over 50, it's very hard to do 3 days a week of strength training and maintain that as they become more advanced into their older years. It's just hard.
Right.
It's a lot of lifting.
So I wanted to get to this point, right? So we've laid down, I think, a pretty good case for why you should go heavy, and then how you would go heavy, and just kind of the general training model. Of course, there's a lot of more specifics. We can save that for another programming episode. So let's talk about why you wouldn't go heavy, or why you might not go maximally heavy. Right. What are some reasons why a lifter would avoid going heavy?
Well, I mean, joint pain. A good example would be joint pain. Let's say you're going heavier and your form's dialed in, you're getting eyes on coaching, everything's fine, your programming's good, and you're hitting heavier lifts, and you start to have joint pain. And you address it, you look at your form, you make sure there's no connective tissue issues, but it's truly articular, it's joint pain. It's because your joints are old.
Yeah, okay.
Plain and simple.
Yeah.
Joints do hurt for some lifters when they lift. And so then the question is, should I go heavy? Should I, go heavier? So what ends up happening with that lifter is they eventually start to think, I shouldn't go heavy anymore.
Yeah.
And really what you should do is you should be careful about how you go heavy, but you still need to go heavy.
Stay in the heavy range, but maybe not maximally heavy, right?
Right.
So the caveat to this is that, if you start, let's just say in a Texas method style training model, if your intensity day starts with 1 set of 5 on a squat, okay, you can keep moving that up for a period of time.
Right.
And then eventually you can't do 1 set of 5 anymore.
No.
You hit a wall.
No, you're going to hit the wall.
And so then what we typically do is we'll have somebody say, okay, that's cool. We're going to do a set of 3 now.
Absolutely,
in your intensity day.
Yeah.
And then eventually that doesn't work. So now you do a set of 2.
Right.
A double for your intensity day. And then eventually you get to the single.
Right.
And there's nowhere else to go, right?
Right.
And so maybe for lifters that are dealing with joint pain, they don't go to that single.
Right.
Right. They maybe stay in the triple range.
Right. And that may be strong enough for them.
And that's fine.
And they also might find that if they pull back a tiny bit and they give themselves a little bit more time to adapt, they might find that there's a tweak along the way that allows them to make that next jump.
Yeah.
To make that next step up. My programming personally has never looked linear. Totally.
Right.
It is a linear roller coaster.
Yeah.
And some of that is based off of discomfort and joint pain. Some of that is based off of my actual just training life. Some of that's based off of my health. Some of that's based off of psychological stresses. And so my goal is that the curve is upward.
Right.
In regards to the whatever we're trying to adapt. But that's going to have lots of ebbs and flows and ups and downs.
Yeah.
And so just because you're having pain on the bench press right now as you go heavy doesn't mean it's going to be there forever.
Right.
Number 1, get coaching. Number 2, change your programming if needed or your technique. And number 3, give yourself some time.
Right.
Give yourself some time. Be patient.
So I'm really curious to see your experience here. I've found that for the masters athletes that I coach, there's kind of a sweet spot when we're getting to this intermediate style of programming.
Yeah.
And I find that they don't tolerate a heavy single set of 5 very long.
Right. No.
Like maybe at the very beginning when they're just starting to do intermediate programming, we'll do a set of 5. But it's, and I think what it is for a lot of people, executing 5 quality reps gets really hard when it's heavy. Rep 4 and 5 seem to always suffer from technique issues. And so let's say, you're doing a squat, the first 3 look good, and now you're just dying because it's so heavy and it's so hard. Rep 4, you get some form breakdown.
Yeah.
You get loose, you get relaxed or whatever. Rep 5 is even worse. Well, rep 4 and 5, that breakdown in form might be enough to cause issues. Now we've got tendonitis or something that pops up.
Yeah.
By the same token, I find that singles
Yeah,
also tend to be difficult because from a form perspective and also just too stressful. So the sweet spot seems to be like doubles and triples.
Yeah, I like to use singles to triples. I mean, singles to triples are kind of where I play with.
Okay. Yeah.
I find that psychologically, most older lifters can, if they say, okay, I only got to do one of these.
Okay.
This way they can get it done, and they can hold their form together usually if they're a reasonable lifter. Doubles are very effective. Triples are very effective. But I do find that when we're talking about heavy and we're talking about how we're going to implement with the set and rep scheme, singles, doubles, and triples in very small sets, like one set of one, 2 sets of 2, or I might do 1 set of 1 set of 2, and 2 sets of 3, or 3 sets of 3, or something like that in the scheme. But I do find that older lifters do much better with that, whereas with a younger lifter, their heavy day might be 3 sets of 5, it might be 5 sets of 3, or it might be a heavy top triple.
Right.
You know, and then back off sets at 5.
Yeah. Yeah.
It changes with the older lifter. And the beautiful thing about that is, and here's what I would say, is that one heavy single or double appears to be, in my experience, enough stress during that week backed up with the volume day that you're doing, especially if you're only doing 2 days of lifting.
Right.
Backed up with the volume day to drive continued growth.
Yeah.
To drive continued growth. And I learned this, I kind of learned this in practicality watching Rip train one time. I was up at WFAC and Rip was training. He was doing deadlifts.
Right.
And he was just doing heavy triples. And I was like, how often are you deadlifting? He said once every 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he was still deadlifting near 500, you know? And he was just doing triples. And so he was maintaining, and I don't know if he was gaining at that time, I can't remember, but he was maintaining his strength, and the stressor was very infrequent.
Right.
And then if he needed to, he could back that up with some lower intensity volume to ensure that he didn't detrain over that cycle.
Right.
That he didn't lose between the intensity days, that he didn't lose his strength. See, that's the goal. The balance here, as we're talking about this, is very complicated.
That's right.
Is not to detrain from bout to bout.
That's right. And clearly the weight on the bar matters here, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
For instance, Hafthor Bjornsson, the world's strongest man, from previous years, he's going to make an attempt, he says, on a 520 kilo deadlift. He recently pulled in his home gym 500 kilos, which is the current world record for a strongman deadlift. That is insanely heavy. That is ridiculously heavy. Well, he pulled that 500 kilos like a month ago, and he says he hasn't pulled heavy since then. He's going to attempt this in 2 weeks, so it's going to be six weeks almost between heavy attempts.
Right.
But the guy's lifting 1,100 pounds. I mean, like, that's a...
And he's got a ton of volume, too. And
he's also got stressor.
Androgenic aids.
Yes.
So and I think so. So what we've talked... Let's kind of bring this together a little bit.
Right.
Number one is the best way we're going to get you strong and start lifting heavy things is through a novice progression, and then work out through its iterations of programming. When you go into an intermediate and advanced programming model, should a master's athlete, lifter, person lift heavy? Yes. The primary reason why is that you need more stress than a younger athlete to cause your body to grow muscle cells through the adaptation cycle and muscle protein synthesis than a younger lifter does. So you got to be lifting heavy. Should we change the way you lift heavy versus a younger lifter? Yes, you should. You're going to have less bouts of lifting heavy potentially, and your set and rep scheme, your reps are probably going to be lower than what we would intervene with a younger lifter. And that varies from program to program, and the history of the lifter. There's a lot of variables there. It does matter. But in general, we really like singles, doubles, and triples on our heavy day, backed up by some volume days. And we might only have that lifter lifting 2 days a week too, okay? Now, the reason why we need to have that heavy day, like we talked about, the number one reason is muscle protein synthesis, building muscle cells because of sarcopenia. But I believe that there are 2 other reasons Why we need to do that, okay? The muscle protein synthesis and building muscle helps us fight off all these degenerative diseases, helps us function better, move better, helps us maintain hormone health, metabolic health, all these variables that are backed up by it. Helps us fight COVID-19, period. It does. Being healthier in the future matters. Yeah. We talked about that in the long game, a recent podcast. But I believe there are really two other reasons why you should lift heavy. Number one, it is good for your joint health.
Yeah.
Connective tissue, articular cartilage, and synovial fluid lubricative production increases with heavier loads. Now, that doesn't mean I want you to, as 55, if you got junky joints, go in there and become a world-class power lifter and try to relive your glory days.
Right.
There is a breaking point there, and I don't know where that is for each individual, but there is a sweet spot there to where lifting too heavy makes your joints hurt.
Right, yeah. And I think we've talked about this off mic before. My sense is that the reason for that is that the different tissue adapts at different rates. And so your muscle bellies will adapt at a certain rate that's faster than your other connective tissue, like your tendons and your ligaments. And so it's possible to get to a point where your muscle bellies are strong enough, they can exert enough force on the joint that the connective tissue isn't quite ready to handle. It hasn't adapted to yet.
Well, I tell my patients, I tell trainees all the time, the hardest person to deal with is the person that wants to grow muscle. They have reasonable connective tissue, tendons and ligaments, but they have junk for joints.
Okay, yeah.
The articular and the hyaline cartilage, two types of cartilage in the joint.
Yeah, so the cartilage.
The articular cartilage and the hyaline cartilage is worn off enough to where they're bone on bone, and now the nociceptive or the painful sensory fibers in the what's called the subchondral bone, the painful fibers are being stimulating because it's damaging the bone, and it hurts like hell.
Yeah.
That person is hard to train because you want to get them under load, but it hurts a lot to get under load. And there does come a point to where I honestly believe, and this is different for every single person, but there does come a point to where they just reasonably they can't even squat their body weight anymore.
Yeah.
And there does come a point to where I believe that person might be better off going and having 2 joint replacements and then being able to come back into the gym and start to lift weights for the benefits that are gained by lifting weights.
Yeah.
Versus there's pros and cons to everything, versus the cons that are associated with having joint replacements, or versus the cons that are associated with not being strong at all.
Right.
And then becoming emaciated and weak and unable to live.
Yeah.
And so I tell patients all the time, there is a timeline to where you have delayed putting off as long as you can, having your joints replaced if you need them replaced, to where your health has declined so much over time, you've lost so much muscle mass and you've had so much hip and lower extremity or shoulder atrophy, whatever it is, muscle loss, that it will take you forever to gain that back. So don't wait until you're just crippled to address the problem. Go see your doctor. Now, I know the science of joint replacements. It's, we talk about, heavy metal toxicity and all these, implant toxicity and all these different things. I get it. It's kind of like testosterone replacement for some individuals. If you're a male and you're 50 years old and you have the testosterone of a female, supplementation, in my mind, is better than the potential risk of not supplementing.
Right.
It's one risk or another, but we try to weigh these things out as to which one is of a least risk but the greatest gain.
Yeah.
And so there are those patients or all those people that just their joints hurt so bad, and so at that point the joint will adapt some to the loads, but at some point there may not be any cartilage there left to adapt. And that's where, you hear people saying, well, I'm going to go get stem cells. And I'm like, your MRI shows you have no cartilage left.
Yeah.
What are they going to grow in there?
Right.
You have no foundational cells to stimulate their growth anymore. You need a cartilage implant.
Yeah.
And right now we call that a joint replacement.
Right.
And so there's that climb.
So in short, lifting heavy is going to stimulate the growth of the connective tissue and the synovial fluid and the other things that make a joint function correctly.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. And your joints need that.
And your joints need that. So you should lift heavy, but there are some people who have enough damage to the joint from previous injuries and arthritis and stuff that they can't get the benefit of that due to the other issues that are going on in the cart.
And that is something that I never prejudge. I put them under the bar and see.
That's right.
Or I put them into the squat position doing sit to stands. I let the activity drive my decision as to whether they're going to be able to do the program or not. In other words, I let the program drive the decision.
Right.
I don't change the program up front because I know they've got bad joints. We try to do the program, and if they can't tolerate it, we try to make modifications. That's my job as a coach, to be creative in how I do that. And then if they can't adapt, we cannot get them stronger, then we have to address the real issue at hand, and that's what we do. But squatting, lifting, pressing, bench pressing is good for your joints. As long as you have reasonable health. And it can take joints that are bad joints and get them more reasonably healthy.
That's right.
The guy that we were talking about with squatting, one of the reasons why he couldn't squat more than 95 was because he couldn't get his shoulder under the bar, if you remember, because you went to that session with me. He couldn't get his shoulder under the bar. Now he doesn't complain about that shoulder anymore with 170, 180 on the bar.
Right.
So he's adapted. So we took a bad shoulder, which he would have prejudged and said, oh, look, I can't squat anything because of my bad shoulder. And we said, no, let's let the movement and the bar adapt you over time. And it has. And he's pressing and bench pressing.
And there you go.
And doing chins.
And he's doubled his squat.
Yeah, exactly.
In 6 weeks.
He's almost doubled his bench press. And so the last thing that's really, really important here about going heavy, and it might be the most important thing for the older lifter, is what it does to our minds. What it does to the psychology of the older person.
Right.
The idea, because I just use, I'm not tooting my own horn, but it's experiential. The idea that last week I set a bench press PR, a lifetime PR, to me is emancipating.
Yeah.
It is liberating to know that there's still something in the tank that I could actually grow. I have to be careful about how I do it, but that I could actually grow and get stronger. Last night, I did a working set PR on the press. I did 190 for 5 sets of 3.
Awesome.
And it felt light.
Yeah.
And so, I'm going to go for a press PR next week. And that's with shoulders that have had surgeries, guys, and are pretty junky.
Yeah.
And my shoulders are feeling good. And so I think that the last thing that it does for the older lifter is it emancipates your mind. It liberates your thought line and gets you thinking about the potential of what's to come. And that creates hope, because hope is belief in things that you cannot see. It's believing in the unseen. And so, but the idea that you're experiencing something now that could be even greater in the future, it drives you. It gives you hope. It gives you, it's just what it does to the human mind. It basically tells you that I can get stronger and I am winning the battle.
Right.
We all know we're going to die.
Yeah.
Right. But we want the time between the dash, between the numbers, the dash, we want it to be really, really good.
That's right.
And so I think the last thing that going heavy does, and why the older lifter should go heavy. I mean, I saw Sully the other day, Dr. Sullivan, who wrote Barbell Prescription. Amazing book. Read it. A lot of the stuff we're talking about today is based off of the principles he elucidates in that book, along with practical programming, starting strength, and several other things.
Right.
But I saw him the other day do a heavy single on the press. I don't know how old Sully is. He might be 60 now, or 59 or 60, I think.
Yeah.
But I mean, he's doing, I think it was a lifetime heavy single, or he matched his heavy single after he had his shoulder done recently, and after he had several surgeries that he was dealing with, problems he had put off. But I mean, there's a perfect example.
Right.
Now, he can't do that every single week.
That's right. Yeah.
Maybe. And he can't do lots of heavy 1-rep maxes all the time.
Right.
But based on the programming and the way that he introduces that, he can do that every so often.
Yeah. That's a great, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's kind of what this looks like in practice, is that there's a natural iteration to how programming goes, right? Because you get to a point where you just can't do the 5 anymore, so you do the 3, so you do the 2, so you could do the single. But that's always tempered by all of these other things we're talking about. And so for you, right, you're feeling good.
Yeah, that's
You're
great.
Programming, you've iterated it from 5s to 3s to doubles to the single, and that's great. Take that PR but you're not going to be trying to hit singles for the next 4 weeks, right?
No.
That would be dumb.
Right.
So take it while your shoulder's feeling great, and then move on.
I'm moving on to something else.
Yeah, move on to the next phase of programming. And that's kind of how this ends up working in practice, is that for some people, there might be a couple times a year that they're really chasing that PR.
Yeah.
Maybe once a year.
That bench PR was my 2020 bench goal.
Yeah, right.
And so I met it. My press PR is I want to press 225 as a single. And so that's my 2020 press goal. Wherever I hit it in 2020 is fine with me. If I hit it next week, awesome. If I don't, awesome too. So,
sure.
But yeah, I think there's the meat on the bones are exactly what we're talking about here, how we actually do this. And it changes from lifter to lifter. It won't be perfect for every single lifter either. There's also this thing I like to say where, let's say you've had a tweaky joint, you've had a surgery, and you've had a total knee replacement. There's post-surgical PRs, guys.
Yeah, right.
There's opportunity there.
Yeah.
If you've had a knee replacement, and let's say you were squatting 225 before, and you're squatting 175 now, 200, 225, whatever you're squatting, you're still doing something that the average person's not doing.
Yeah, that's huge. Yeah.
I mean, it's a huge deal. So take those small victories. And that's the other thing I think Going Heavy does every so often. It gives you those small victories. And it's beautiful because it is enough stimulus to help to grow and maintain the kind of muscles that we need over time to improve our quality of life. So, man, heavy lifting. I love it. It's a heavy subject. But, hey, guys, thanks for joining us here on 40 Fit Radio. Thanks for joining the 40 Fit Nation. We continue to try to bring you good content, bring you good info. If you want to reach out to us, you can at info@40fit.com.
Yeah, please let us know your particular circumstances. Like, we want to hear about what you're doing and what your heavy days are looking like. Share that with us. Ask us questions. Be happy to answer those.
Go to our Facebook page, 40 Fit Nation. You can also reach out to Trent and I on Instagram at Marmalade Cream for Coach Trent and me at Dr. Deaton. We love having you listening to us. We love your feedback. I feed off your feedback. Please tell us what you want to hear. Please tell us what we're doing wrong. Please tell us what we're doing right. Please let us know that you care about us out there. I'm just joking.
Is there anyone out there?
Yeah. Is there anyone out there? Is that a song? But I mean, we love hearing the success stories, seeing the success stories. I've got a friend, and she's been posting daily on Facebook during this COVID-19 deal. And she said the other day that during her training session, she had listened to one of our podcasts, and she listened to 2 podcasts during her training session that day, and she just gave us a shout out. That just fuels my fire to want to produce more good content for you guys.
That's awesome.
So keep doing that for us. We love you guys, and thanks for joining the 40 Fit Nation.
Thank you.